Hi, my name is Garrett Nuzzo, and I did my consulting project with SOCWA. SOCWA is located in Dana Point, California. They are an environmental public service agency, so they're focused on renewable energy and water reclamation. It's a relatively small organization with less than 60 members, and the focus of the study was with the operations unit. And I worked closely with James Jones, the chief plant operator, and his treatment plant staff. The consulting need for this project was an increase in efficiency and a decrease in permit violations. The nature of the presenting problem was a new wave of retirements, kind of creating a brain drain effect within the organization. So the focus was on technical errors at first, miscalculations in calculating their parameters for operations, and analyzing data incorrectly. The data collection approach that I used was first observation. So observing the operators performing their duties, seeing if they made technical mistakes and where they made those technical mistakes, watching the operators interact with one another. Did they help each other? Were they asking for advice? And lastly, the supervisors' interactions with the operators. Did the operators feel comfortable asking them questions? Did the supervisors provide guidance? Next, I moved on to an interview process, asking the operators how they feel about the training that they've been given. Are they properly trained? Do they feel comfortable doing their job? And what would best help them do their job better? And then lastly, I went through the data books and record logs. So looking for correlations between days when violations occurred and mistakes that were made. So let's look at what the data showed. We have a correlation chart here on the right. So the data reaffirmed the belief that the mistake setting parameters led to violations. The only violations that occurred in the last 2 years were TSS and turbidity. But there's a high positive correlation between those two and MCRT. The MCRT target parameter was off by 8% or more each time a violation occurred, and 90% of violations didn't use the MCRT calculation to set the parameters. So this, to me, showed that there was a new issue. The mistakes were not made technically by making the calculations. The operators were simply not using the most effective or accurate method to set their parameters. And the most accurate and effective method was the MCRT. It's the most reliable, and they just weren't using that. So a new issue emerged. There was little interaction with the supervisors. The operators did not feel that they had been trained. The operators didn't know what was expected of them. And the operators said that the thing that would help them best do their job would be a standardized procedure or training program, how to use this MCRT calculation, and just being able to communicate with their supervisors. So the source of the problem seems to have shifted from the operator's technical skills to the lack of guidance, expectations, and training provided. So how did I present my findings? I tried to be as objective as possible and let the data speak for itself. I wanted to show the clients rather than tell them. And this kind of created some uncomfortable feelings because the supervisors were in the room, but I let those uncomfortable feelings sit. And this allowed time for discussion, and it showed that they actually were learning. Through their discussions and brainstorming, they were making recommendations that I was going to make. So we went over these recommendations, and I addressed any of their concerns, and we were able to work through that process very well. Key takeaways, the main one was resistance for me. How do we manage that resistance? What's the root of the resistance? And in this case, it seemed to be, lack of or fear of giving up control. So how did I address it? I named that resistance, and I was patient. I let those uncomfortable feelings sit, and then I addressed all their concerns and expectations so they weren't blindsided by anything. The project conclusion. The proposed recommendations were accepted. There's a training program in the works, and they already implemented the red flag system that I recommended. It's approved by the managers, the leaders have been chosen, and the training format is still tentative because of COVID. The start date will be the last week of March. So thank you for listening to my presentation.